Man, I sure am loving this game. It sure does suck that it's going to get overshadowed for most people by Tears of the Kingdom. Man, this game is great. I feel like I'm forgetting something though. Wait. Crap. I need to make a video. So, Fuga Melodies of Steel 2 is a really great game, but you probably haven't even heard of the first game, so maybe I should start there. Fuga Melodies of Steel is the story of 6 kids, later 12, caught up in a fictional war very clearly paralleling World War II. When their village is invaded, they flee and stumble upon a gigantic tank. Seeing no other way to save their families, they pilot it and join the war. It's a tale of a tragic, pointless war and the toll it exacts on those caught up in it. It's also a prequel to 2 games you probably haven't heard of, Tail Concerto and Solatorobo. I don't have time to cover these, but if you are interested in them, check out the RPG Monger's video on the latter. It's what got me to try Melodies of Steel in the first place. But at its core, the thing that kept me playing is just that it is a very good RPG. The combat is focused on party composition. Each character has a weapon type, and hitting an enemy with the right weapon type can cause the enemy's turn to be delayed, reducing the damage you take over the course of a fight. So your team has to be adaptable enough to strike any weakness. But it's not just as simple as swapping in characters with the right weapon types. The bonds between characters are an important theme of the game's story, and that is reflected by the gameplay where every character has a relationship value with every other. For each of the 3 active party slots, you have a support slot. The supporting character gives a passive effect to the main character, as well as determining the extra effects dealt by link attacks, super moves that are only available after filling a meter in combat. And the effects of these bonuses and the power of link attacks are determined by the character's bonds. So while versatility is important, it can also be valuable to limit yourself to certain pairings. On top of this, each character has their own selection of skills. While 2 characters might both use grenade launchers, one of them might focus on status effects while another focuses on healing your tank. So you have a lot of factors to consider. You want a good spread of weapon types, a good selection of skills, and good supporting skills. You also want to keep your active rotation down to a limited number of set pairings to maximize your support bonuses. One of the best examples of how these systems can come together is the twins, Chick and Hack. They're an obvious 2 characters to team up given their siblings, and they have incredible synergies. Hack had a skill with a short delay between attacks that got stronger with each use, while Chick had a support ability that reduced the cost of skills, letting her brother spam the skill freely. Meanwhile, Chick had access to very powerful attacks that could damage all enemies and inflict status effects. Her brother's support ability boosts skill damage, and that just allows her to decimate encounters in a single action. And since they have different weapon types, you can basically always have one of them active unless you really need 3 machine gunners. Outside of combat, things are pretty streamlined. You have brief interludes in town, which mostly let you exchange resources, but the main draw here is the brief breaks between combat. It's basically a pretty cozy little management sim. You have a limited number of action points to spend on tasks such as cooking meals, planting food to use in those meals, upgrading your tank, gathering materials for those upgrades, raising characters' bonds. All of these are important to your combat performance, so you have to spend your time wisely. Lastly, there's the map screen. It's likewise streamlined, with your tank automatically advancing left to right. You just need to choose routes and fight battles along the way. While it is a bit simple, the risk versus reward ends up being very enticing. Can you handle a tougher route right now? How long until the next bit of healing? Is it worth giving up better rewards to take a route that will restore your health and let you take more gambles later on? It's a simple but effective way of creating tension. So it's a tightly designed RPG with a good story and charming characters. You should absolutely play it. But now there's a sequel, and that's the one that this video is supposed to be about. And just like a certain game that came out the following day and completely overshadowed it, Melodies of Steel 2 takes everything the first game did and refines it beautifully. So comparing it to the first game, first up is the story. This time it's not so much about the tragedy of war and the effects it has on the people caught up in it. Instead, it's a much more personal conflict. It feels surprisingly natural as a part 2. Even if the stakes are technically lower, they're made to feel more personal and are portrayed as much more emotionally trying for the children. It's very effective as a way to manage scale creep. That is all I will say though, because I don't want to spoil anything if I can help it. Probably the thing that throws me off most in this sequel is the fact that they changed some characters' abilities kind of randomly. For example, Hack goes from a monster with pure damage output to being focused on delaying enemies much more strategically, not to mention he swaps from a cannon to a machine gun, and his sister Chick is now a replacement for Hannah as the main healer. Kinda weird and disappointing after how good of a combo those two were in the first game, and in general it just kind of throws me off because I want to do the things that worked last time. It's all still good, but this will throw you for a loop. The biggest change to combat is the revamp to the soul cannon system. In the first game, if you were losing a boss battle, you could choose to permanently kill off one of the kids to win, but this permanently hamstrung you and locked you out of the best ending. Not really a choice you want to make. In the sequel, though, it's replaced with two separate systems. The first is the Managarm, which is available in any battle. It's extremely powerful, but it knocks out the kid who uses it, and it prevents you from gaining any EXP. Still punishing, but unlike the original Soul Cannon, it at least isn't a case where, in most cases, you would probably rather just lose and return to the last checkpoint. Meanwhile, the Soul Cannon itself is revised into essentially being an extra failure condition. If your tank's health drops low enough to trigger it, you have to select someone to load into it. And if you don't win the battle before it finishes charging, it fires on its own. It's very effective, and it turns what was once an easy way out into a second failure condition. Outside of combat was where the first game was the roughest, so here's where the most visible improvements are. When doing tasks during the intermission, instead of having a chance to just flat out fail, you're now guaranteed to succeed, but you have a chance at a great success that will usually either gain you more materials or consume less materials, depending on what you're doing. This makes the dice roll feel a bit less impactful, which reduces the feeling that your overall success or failure can be made or broken by pure random chance. Also, the town intermissions are a lot more polished, with more people to talk to and an actual currency system for the shops. Oh, and there's also a moral choice type mechanic, you know, the kind that were in fashion like 10 years ago before everyone realized they weren't that great. Honestly, it's most similar to Mass Effect 1's, which is probably for the best. There are two separate meters you advance instead of a single meter you move back and forth on. Plus, it's not a strict good and evil, but rather it could be summed up as determination versus compassion. Like most of these systems, though, it still does give you the feeling that you really should just be focusing on one, which kind of sucks, honestly. And to finish things off with a rapid fire of small things, I love the new character designs. Link events seem generally better. In the first game, they could feel like 3 parts of the same short event, but here they feel a bit more fleshed out. And lastly, the menus are improved a bit, such as showing exact effects in the cooking menu, or showing how many of a product you have in the farm menu, so you don't have to go back and forth to the kitchen to check. Fuga, Melodies of Steel 2 is an amazing sequel to an already great game. It honestly really sucks that all the oxygen in the room was taken up by Tears of the Kingdom, no matter how good that game is. There's a lot of games coming out and competing for your attention too right now. But if you want a really good RPG and this beautiful art style appeals to you, these games are a great choice. And I do mean games. You really do need to play these two in order. The second game's story relies so much on you caring about the children. If you didn't already go through the first game with them, it just won't be as gripping. This really isn't a case where you can just start with the sequel. Fortunately, if you have Game Pass, both games are on there, and if you ask me, they're some of the best titles available there. But either way, they're amazing games, and I highly recommend that you give them a try.